Melanie. Welcome to the podcast. To get us started, I'll just have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So, my name is Melanie Chavez, and I'm a wife. I'm a mom of four, and I have a podcast as well called Christian Women Healing Trauma. And I work primarily with women who are healing from trauma. We work on regulating their nervous systems, really getting to a place of safety, not only in their body, but their minds as well, and surrendering to God in the process of healing. So that is what I do. Yeah, in a nutshell.
Okay, I love that. And um, can you tell me a little bit about how you do that? Like, for someone who's never heard of coaching, what does it mean to actually work on those things, to be coached through it? Like, how does that benefit someone?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I get a lot of questions about this, because they're like, what's coaching? Is it like therapy? Is it different? So I like to explain it as therapy is more, looking kind of at the past, right? Healing from more past things, staying focused in the past and like building skills, right? Coaching, I love coaching because it really focuses more on future and really like learning skills that are going to help you moving forward, right? So that's essentially what I do. So I coach women one on one and really kind of meet them where they're at. So whatever they're struggling with, we kind of talk about those things. I give them tools, resources, and kind of just guide them through certain things that I have not only done myself and healed from myself, but giving them those resources and support that they need. So,
I love that. I love that so much. And before I even dive into the other questions, if so, that's like the coaching side of things, but what do you do on your podcast? Like, how do you help people there?
yeah, so on the podcast, we talk about a variety of different things. Obviously, I focus a lot on trauma and we talk a lot about the nervous system because when you have been through different traumas in your life, right, you're kind of stuck in that fight or flight. So you might be getting anxiety all the time, or you're lashing out, or you're angry. Like all of that comes up, right? And we feel it in our bodies first. So I talk a lot about healing in our body, like which is regulating our nervous system. Because when you're stuck in that fight or flight, you really can't heal anything else. You can't work on your mindset. You can't work on that because your body is stuck in that place of like, oh, I'm being attacked by a bear. Like I have to run for my life, right? So we really start and talk a lot about regulating our nervous system as the starting point to healing. But we also talk a lot about different mental health issues and a little bit of parenting and just how to really surrender to the Lord and trust Him, right? Because when we have gone through trauma, and I found this for myself over my journey, is that I stopped trusting God like years and years ago, right? Because of that trauma, because of all that hurt. I wasn't actually trusting him. I wasn't actually surrendering that pain to him, even though I was reading the Bible, I was praying, I was doing all the things, right? But there was a part of me still holding back, still not trusting, still, worried about being hurt again or, something happening. So, yeah, I mean, we talk about, like I said, a lot of different things, but it comes together beautifully, right? Like trauma, mental health, anxiety, like healing. And it's such a great way to intertwine all those things together. So,
Yeah, I love that you say that because when I grew up, a lot of like the issues between me and my mother was that she hadn't done some of the healing. So I think it's interesting
mm,
too to see like that this trickles into our parenting and onto our kids. And so as you were talking, I was just thinking about like what you said about how it often makes us not trust God. And that's
yeah,
so good because trusting God, I found to be so true. I think when we were doing the interview for your podcast, we talked about like what does that coaching framework look like, where we like
yeah,
actually talk about this is my thought, and then that led to this
right.
emotion, which led to these outcomes. And it as I've been doing that in my own life, I've noticed so many things go back to the fact that I don't trust God. And
Right,
as
right.
I unpacked that, so that was so good that you said that because it's true, but it's not always our first thought. Like we don't always think that's the root of what's going on, but it is so often. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it really is. And it's like it took me almost my whole life to realize that, right? Because I mean, essentially I grew up in the church. I started going to church when I was 5, but that didn't change. Like I still had, I was living in a chaotic household. Like even though like one of my parents was saved, the other wasn't. So it was I still was in that like trauma environment, right? Um, but over that time, like I realized, and God really opened my eyes through my own healing, right? In years of doing different things like therapy and my own coaching and like just everything, right? He really showed me, like, you are not trusting. You're not trusting me enough. And I wasn't actually stepping out in obedience, right? Because trust is a form of obedience, right? Because the Bible says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. I wasn't doing that with all my heart. So I feel a lot of the women I talk to like really can resonate with that, like you said, because it's like we think we're doing all the right things, right? We think we're praying and we're worshiping and all that, but it's like a part of us deep down isn't really trusting. We're still kind of gripping and holding on to that. I like to call it the control, right? Because we want to control so much. Because usually when we've gone through trauma, especially in childhood, we didn't have control over that, right? So we are grasping and trying so hard to control every aspect that is actually preventing us from fully surrendering and fully trusting God.
I love that. Okay, I want to just full circle this real fast and then correct me if I got any of this wrong. So, what it sounds like you're saying to me is that there's this issue that we don't trust God, but there's even a deeper root behind that, and that's that our nervous system is not regulated. And
Right.
because of that, that we don't trust God, and then we're not seeing the outcomes that we want to see in our spiritual life and in the physical realm. And
Yeah.
that all circles back to this trauma that we've experienced and the way that it affected our body. And I'd love to hear more about that. I'm assuming, like, I guess the question here is like, what in the body happens when you go through trauma that actually leads to all of this cyclical
Yeah.
cycle that we're looking at?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we have gone through trauma, and it can be any, I mean, any trauma, right? What's considered like a trauma to me might not look like that to you or someone else, right? But it's all how we have lived through it, how we understood it to be, right? What we experienced in that moment, right? So this could be one traumatic event. It could be like lifelong, right? In childhood, like a whole bunch of years of trauma, right? So it doesn't necessarily matter what type of trauma. When we are in that state of trauma, right, our bodies are created beautifully by God to protect us, right? Our brain is always looking at protection. It wants to keep us safe, right? Because if we're in the wilderness, right, and we come upon a bear, then we automatically kick into that fight or flight mode, right? Which is our nervous system trying to protect us from being eaten alive by a bear, right? So your body cannot tell the difference between you being in front of a bear or you going through that trauma that you've been through, right? So let's say you grew up in a home, like I'll use myself for an example of a lot of parents fighting and yelling and like just chaos, right? Not no emotional safety. Over years and years of that, my body tried to keep me safe by not only internalizing those feelings, right? But it's actually like the physical feeling of it. So, your nervous system, when you have anxiety or when you're triggered, right? You get that like maybe the heart starts pounding, or maybe you're getting sweaty, or maybe you get a headache, or maybe you have that urge. Like for me, it's the urge to run away, right? That flight, like get me out of this situation now, right? Just like I'm being chased by a bear, like get me out of here. So our bodies can't tell the difference between one trauma or like the bears coming after us, right? So what happens is when we're not like really healing and regulating our nervous system, when our nervous system is always on high alert, it's going to keep you like in that constant state of fear. because you're always anticipating something to happen, right? You're anticipating that bear or that trigger's coming, right? So, what we want to do is when we learn to regulate and get to that space of a rest and digest and calm, that's going to show our bodies that we are safe, and that even though this like trigger comes up, right? I know for me a lot, it's like my kids trigger me to no end, right? And you probably can relate to this. Like our kids, our spouses, they trigger us beyond because they're the closest to us, right? So over time, as you start regulating your nervous system, let's say you get triggered by your child or by whoever, you're able to know the difference, and you've taught your body the difference of no, I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm not being chased by a bear, like you don't need to protect me, right? So your body's going to start learning that and start being in a place of more calm and peace and be able to really recover from that trigger. um because otherwise, like I know before I started regulating my nervous system, before I even learned about it, like that anxiety, that trigger, like was debilitating, right? It literally ruined my day. Not only like in my body, like it was constant, when you get anxiety, it's like you feel that pit in your stomach or your heart's racing. That's not comfortable, right? That's not a great feeling. We don't want to feel like that, right? And years and years of going through this, like I was thinking something's wrong with me, and like why am I feeling like this every single day, right? And then learning about the nervous system is just so fascinating, how God created our bodies. And once I was able to sort of get to that regulated place of safety, then I'm able to really deal with my triggers in a healthy way by, before it was yelling, trying to run away, lash out, crying, or whatever it is for you, right? But now I'm able to handle that so much better because my body is in that calm place and I know I'm safe, right? So then I can start working on those other things.
Yeah, that's so good. And I have a kind of dynamic question to follow that up with. So, I was doing a week of Voxer coaching with this young woman, and usually I don't do Voxer coaching. Usually it's coaching calls, but they have like crazy busy schedules. So I was like, I'll
Hmm.
accommodate, do this instead. And so as I was talking to her, I started to kind of notice some of those things that, like, hey, this might have something to do with your nervous system.
Hmm.
Actually told her about your podcast and all of that. And I was telling her that that could be something really good to look into for her because she was like having panic attacks. But I want to kind of give
Hmm.
you the scenario so I can get your input
Yeah.
on this. So she works a very dangerous job, had a very traumatic childhood. And so it's kind of like she's constantly in fight or flight, right? Because she went through
Mm,
it in childhood.
right.
Then her job is literally like not perceived danger, like actual danger, like her life is in danger on a regular
Yeah.
basis at her job. And she said when she's in those situations, she's completely fine, clear headed, right? And I'm
Mm,
assuming that has to do with the adrenaline and all that, our
yeah.
survival instincts. But then when she gets home or, something small, random is happening and a fork gets dropped or something really small, then she has a panic attack. And
Mm,
she was telling me, it doesn't make sense to me or my husband because when I do all this dangerous stuff, I'm fine. But then when I get in a safe environment and the littlest thing happens, then I like have this complete full-blown panic attack. And she was sharing how icky that feels and how frustrating it is.
yeah.
And I was relating to that because as a teenager, I went through panic attacks and it would be the most random times they would just show
Mm,
up. And so my hypothesis for her was that, when you're working your job or you're in these survival instinct places, like your body knows what to do when it's in survival mode. It's keeping you alive, it's keeping you clear-headed. But
right.
then once you get into a safe environment where, you're at home or you're somewhere that you're more comfortable with, you kind of start to come out of that. Maybe your adrenaline lowers a little bit, and then you can start to panic a little more, whereas you might not have been able to in survival mode. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. If you feel like what I said was true, if there was anything you would have added to that, and what your take on panic attacks are.
Yeah, that's so good. And I totally agree with what you said. So, as you were talking, I'm thinking, well, yes, of course that makes sense because her home is like her safety, right? That is where we're most comfortable, right? And I kind of think about my own kids, right? So, like when my kids were in daycare or whatever, right? They were perfect angels in daycare. They were great, like no problems. And then the minute they get home, they're like hitting each other, they're yelling, they're like, angry. And I used to question, like, what is going on here? But like, it's because I am their safety net, right? Home is their safety net where they can let their guard down, right? They can feel what they're feeling because they know, like, they're not going to be judged. They're going to be loved no matter what, right? So that's the same thing in relation to your client because the guards are down, right? She's safe in her house. And I know how frustrating it can be because I get the same way too, even in my own house, right? So where you're at, she's at work, right? She's doing this dangerous job, but at work, it's like we have a different posture, right? We're expected to work. We have like focus, right? We have a job to do. um so we kind of keep ourselves together, right? And it's kind of funny because kids are the same way. Like I said, at school they keep themselves together, and then some of my kids, they would come home and just completely melt down. Or even before we got home, when they see me and I'm picking them up, they're having a meltdown, right? It's because it's like that's your safety, right? I was their safety, their safe place. So they felt comfortable, they felt they could be themselves, right? So I would definitely say that I agree with you on that 100%, which doesn't make it any easier, right? Because you
Right.
want to feel good in your home and you want to feel like not triggered and not panicky all the time. Um, and there are ways, like obviously, different things we can do to regulate our nervous system, even in our house. Um, Different things we can, and we'll probably chat about that in a little bit. But yeah,
Oh
but I
yeah.
totally agree with everything you said. It's right on.
Okay.